Commissioner Tindall. We do. Okay, I believe we have a quorum. Oh, there he is. So you're back now. Okay. All right, I'll call our meeting to order. And the first bill on the agenda is Senate Bill number 2834, the Mississippi Historic Site Preservation Fund and Grant Program established within the Department of Archives and History. That's Senator Hobson's bill, so I'd ask him to explain the bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill, we passed in appropriations. The short version is that it creates three categories for essentially heritage sites. One is Native American, two is Civil War battlefields, and three is civil rights. It will allow Archives and History, if we put money into a fund, they can utilize that for groups that want to come in. There are various groups around the country that like to come in and help support those heritage sites. And if they've got some match within Archives and History, they can use those funds to put forth a match to help bring money to our state. There are details about how it's done in Archives and History that I went over in the bill with appropriations. But let me just open it up for questions if I can, for anybody that's got any questions about the bill that has not had it explained to them thus far.
Anyone?
If not, I would move title sufficient do pass.
Title sufficient to pass. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Bill passes. Next is Senate Bill 2536, Athletics, enact the Mississippi Fairness Act. That, I believe, is Senator Hill's bill, and I'll ask her to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, what this bill seeks to do is protect women, females, from unfair competition from males coming into their designated sport. Mississippi has shown through an amicus curiae brief with Idaho last year that Mississippi supports this actual language. I think the committee sub that came out of colleges and universities is a good committee sub. I think there's a little bit of language that we need to delete once we get to the floor, but it's as simple as that. It basically says that we will protect Title IX and females' sports. They will not be spectators in their own sports, that they will be competing against other females and not competing against males and losing titles to males. And it also gives some protection for educational institutions. It gives a private cause of action for any athlete who's deprived of their ability to compete in their own female sport. It actually would prevent what's going on in Connecticut right now if we were to have this law, because it would be preemptive.
Senator Turner Ford, what do you seek recognition for?
I just couldn't hear thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just couldn't hear the last part of what Senator Hill.
I said that the litigation that's going on in Connecticut right now, it's headed to the Supreme Court, where there is a female plaintiff who has been deprived of, I think, 4 state titles and a bunch of scholarships and opportunities because Connecticut has enacted a policy in their high schools to whereas biological males can come over and identify as females and compete against women. So this case is going to the Supreme Court. And if Mississippi enacts this law along with Idaho and several other states that are trying to pass this law, it will even strengthen that case before the Supreme Court and strengthen Idaho's law that's in the Ninth Circuit that we supported with an amicus curiae brief.
Do I have a motion?
Motion be title sufficient, do pass. Committee sub.
Motion is title sufficient to pass committee sub. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Next is Senate Bill 2165, the Veteran Service Officers Revised Certain Qualifications and Requirements. This bill was introduced, I think, by Senator Seymour. Is there anyone here from the VA that wants to talk about this bill? Anyone? Okay, what this bill does is give our state VA the ability to certify certain, our local VA advisors that are appointed by the counties. It gives them the ability to get a certain certification that then they don't have to go through our VA to get to the federal VA. They can go directly to the federal VA and they will talk to them then. It will make the system so much easier for our county VA administrators. That's about all I know about the bill. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer. If not, do I have a motion? Motion is title sufficient to pass. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next is Senate Bill 2435, the Alcoholic Beverages Revised Various Provisions Relating to Distillation, Distillery, excuse me. And I believe that is Senator Boyd's bill, and I'm going to ask her to tell us all about her bill.
As you may remember, last year, Senator McMahon had a bill that he brought before the legislature that passed out, and it was to, and it was enabled a meadery in his area to be able to serve mead wine that they made at their distillery. This bill does the same thing with gin distilleries here in the state. Particularly in my district, I have Wonderbird Gin Distillery down in Taylor, Mississippi. It's a rice wine. They make a rice gin. They're the only ones in the country that make a rice gin, and it's won several national awards at different places. And so this would allow people to come and taste the gin at the distillery. I'll just briefly go through the code sections that we're changing here. Line 369 allows on-premise consumption at the distillery. So therefore, if you go to a tasting, you'll be able to taste it there. The on-premise consumption has to be consistent with city or county premise consumption laws, and any other beverage components containing alcohol can't exceed 20% of the beverage being sold. Lines 562 through 566, we added distilled spirits in here. Lines 666 and through 668 add distilled spirits to the section where the native wines are already allowed for on-site pickup. And line 685 reduces the fee for small batch distilleries to $2,800 from $4,500. And line 746 and 748 allows for the Department of Revenue to put a privilege tax on the first year production through that. So that's kind of the basic changes on the bill. This would affect all small batch distilleries. I kind of want to make sure that that's clear. I had a question about that after it came out of finance. And we're hopeful that given the large amount of agricultural production that we have in the state, those fees are a little bit steep for those that are starting out doing small batches. We're hopeful that by reducing these fees, we encourage more people to get in the market. Any questions?
You've heard the explanation.
Title sufficient, do pass.
Have a motion, title sufficient to pass. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next is Senate Bill number 2187. It's the Universal Recognition of Occupational Licenses Act. Let me, before I recognize Senator Blackwell, say that I have worked with Senator Hill on a bill that's very similar, but it was one trade specific, and that was cosmetologist. I talked with her, and Senator Blackwell's bill covers a more wide, diverse group of professionals that have occupational licenses, and I will ask him to explain his bill so we can cover more areas of expertise. Senator Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a bill, it's to require the occupational licensing boards to issue a qualified applicant from other states, or, I'm sorry, let me go back. It's to require occupational licensing boards to issue a license or government certification by recognizing certain qualified applicants from other states. We passed a bill similar to this last year for the military, and so it basically made it easier for military families to come in here and for their spouse to obtain jobs. Right now, with COVID going on, some of the states and have basically closed down. So I think Mississippi, we would have a good opportunity. We've got a lovely state here, but we could easily have these folks come in and accept their occupational licenses. Arizona, Montana, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Utah, Iowa, and Idaho already have this kind of legislation in place. 20 other states have submitted it since 2020. And Arizona is one of the fastest growing states right now because of their passage of this. Basically, what would occur is the board shall issue an occupational license or government certification to a person upon application if all of the following apply. They hold a current and valid occupation license or government certification in another state. The person has held the occupational license for government certification in another state for at least a year. The board in the other state required the person to pass an examination. The board in the other state holds the person in good standing. The person does not have a disqualifying criminal record. No board in another state revoked the person's occupational license. The person did not surrender an occupational license because of negligence. The person does not have a complaint, allegation, or investigation pending, and the person pays all applicable fees in this state. In some cases, the person may have to take a qualifying exam. The board may require a person to pass a jurisprudence examination specific to relevant state laws that regulate our specific occupation. That's sort of an explanation of the bill. Answer any questions.
Anyone? Senator Hobson, what do you seek?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Blackwell, what problem are we trying to solve here? Are we having difficulties with people getting, I know we've got some area specific in the past, and I think we've addressed some of those, teachers, of course, medical. What other issues are we having out there that we need to?
I don't have a
this bill?
specific occupation, but we've kind of targeted hit, miss, picking different things, different occupations, and this covers all those occupations. Just like Senator Hill's bill was going to do just cosmetologists, I believe. But this covers everybody. And for your relief, it does not cover attorneys. They're handled by the Supreme Court. So.
I was certainly not getting at that. I saw that in the bill, but I just wonder if there's any, if the drag net is so big and wide that maybe it's pulling in some areas that we may look back and go, whoops, we let somebody in and they don't know that Mississippi provisions are entirely different than their state's provisions.
Well, there's, I think, provisions in this bill. Again, testing can be done. And basically, we're recognizing their experience, not so much their license.
If you can get, if you can, we don't have to do it now, but give me examples of some professions where we're excluding people where there's not differences. For using law as an example, our laws are entirely different than Arizona in many, or Louisiana's certainly very different from Louisiana's, but there are nuances that are, each state has. But if you can get me a list of those professions, I'm a little leery of this. I don't want to try to move to kill it at this point, but I'm leery that we may be opening up something that we have a hard time controlling.
All right, I'll be happy to get those to you.
Thank you.
Senator Hill, for what reason do you seek recognition?
I wanted to follow up on Senator Hobson's question to Senator Blackwell, if I may.
You're recognized.
With regard to cosmetology, what I have found doing the research on that is there's about 14 or 15 other states that allow apprenticeship hours and testing, which is like 2.5 years, typically a long apprenticeship. And if you go on the website for cosmetology, Mississippi will not recognize any apprenticeship hours. So somebody that would be moving here from one of those 13, 14 states that had gotten their license through apprenticeship and testing would have to start all over in the state of Mississippi, and they would accept none of their credentials because they got it through apprenticeship. That was one of the reasons, because that makes people from 14 or 15 states not move to Mississippi for that reason.
One more question.
Senator Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As it relates to a bill we discussed earlier today, the Occupation Licensing Review Committee, would there be a need to even have, I mean, there's certainly a need to have some of these boards and commissions, but that may change up a lot of this dramatically. How do we reconcile those issues?
Changing the boards?
The OLRC, which is in the business of making sure that we're not restricting people from getting licenses for various things, and this may obviate that committee entirely, or certainly change things up. I'm concerned that we may be stepping on the toes of tripping over ourselves on this.
Like I said, I'll get you some additional info, but just earlier today, we passed a bill in public health for social workers to give them temporary licensure because we don't have enough social workers here. So this is just another, it just so happened it came up today, but just another reason that we should take a serious look at this bill. But I'll get you those occupations.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move to put a reverse repealer in this bill, because I do think it needs to, I'd like to see
Senator,
this.
we're not going to amend the bill because that would be a
This is single
killer.
referred, isn't it?
Oh, it's not referred. Excuse me, my bad.
Thank you.
My bad.
I did check that before.
You are a genius. Okay, you may,
I'd offer motion is to add a reverse repealer.
okay. You've heard the motion. Are there any questions of Senator Hobson? Okay, all those in favor of reverse repealer say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Senator Hill.
If you could indulge me to follow up one more time on Senator Hobson's questions. With regard to these boards, do I have permission?
Yes.
Okay, with regard to these licensing boards, regardless of how they get licensed, I think there will always be a need for these boards for overseeing the profession and for disciplinary actions and things like that. So I don't think any of this will move to dissolve any of these boards. I think it will just maybe shift the role a little bit as far as licensing on the front end. But I think the oversight and the disciplinary actions and any changes, the regulatory changes certainly would have to go through the commission, but any oversight or disciplinary actions, there would always be a need for the board for that.
Thank you. Senator Turner Ford. Okay. Other questions? Do I have a motion?
Title is sufficient to pass committee sub.
Title sufficient to pass, committee sub. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next is Senate Bill number 2648. Has to do with carbon dioxide, and that's all I'm going to say. And I believe, to explain the bill, although it was Senator Carter's bill, Patrick Sullivan is here. If you would, sir, come to the podium and explain the bill to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bill proposes to amend legislation that was passed in 2011. The legislation passed in 2011 set up regulatory programs for geologic carbon sequestration. This bill amends a component of that for Class 6 wells. Class 6 wells are used for permanent carbon dioxide geologic sequestration. The reason for that is the closest activity in something that resembles Class 6 sequestration very closely is Class 2 well sequestration, which is what you may know as enhanced oil recovery. It's a business that we've had for several decades here in Mississippi, going back to the initial legislative action that set that off back in the mid-'80s. And so the reason this is being requested at this time is this is not an activity that's currently taking place in Mississippi, but you can look out there on the horizon and see this. For that matter, it's not taking place other than just in a few instances across the U.S. But we can look out there on the horizon, and we can't see exactly what it's going to look like, but we can see that there may be demand for this type of activity at some point down the road. It could be an enormous economic activity for Mississippi, and this simply puts where we think is the regulation is at the right place and allows for that rule writing process to start, which we expect could take several years, must be approved by EPA, and that's a big point on this matter is we want to have industry and our regulatory agencies in Mississippi, the Mississippi Oil and Gas Board being the regulatory agency in this case, along with DEQ at the table, creating a program in Mississippi rather than the EPA office in Atlanta. Be happy to take any questions.
Anyone? Senator Blunt, for what purpose you seek recognition?
For a question, Mr. President, or Mr. Chairman?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what is DEQ doing now, and then who would do it if this bill becomes law?
So there's no activity right now. When the legislation was passed in 2011, it required that program rules start to be developed. I think there were several conversations, but that process just wasn't completed. And so what this will do is transfer that authority to the Oil and Gas Board. DEQ will still have a seat at the table. There's a lot of the input that they would have that we would value, especially in dealing with EPA through the process. But to answer your question, just because there hasn't been any demand for it, there hasn't been much done since 2011.
And the demand would change passage of this legislation?
Well, 10 years down the road, back when the legislation was initially passed, this is the type of activity that I don't think anybody could really see out there on the horizon. Now you can see it coming at some point and in some form, and so the purpose here is to start to get ready for that, which step one is to write rules for a program. The state of Louisiana has already started that process. State of Texas legislature is considering a similar bill. On both of those cases, it's proposed in those states to regulate it at what's the equivalent of Mississippi's Oil and Gas Board. And the Gulf Coast region is a region of the country that's looked at as an ideal place for this type of activity. And so the expectation is that this could be driven by federal policy, but it could also be driven by corporate policy.
Anyone? Do I have a motion? Title's fit to pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next is Senate Bill 2829, the Department of Revenue allowed to use TAG revenue to cover TAG program expenses with surplus lapsing into the general fund. I believe Commissioner Graham is here, and you please come explain your bill to us, or this bill to us.
Mr. Chairman and the committee, thank you for having us present this bill today. The Department of Revenue helps counties manage their tag inventory. So when you go in to get a tag or you go in to renew your tag and get your decal, the tags and decals are actually provided by the Department of Revenue to the counties. And so we purchase those tags, we get them shipped to the counties, and we help them manage their inventory. This bill tweaks the way that we pay for those tags. It modifies the way that we pay for those tags. Currently, the Appropriations Committee in the Senate and House approve a general fund appropriation for the department. It's a line item appropriation in our appropriation bill. We're requesting that be modified to allow the part of the registration fees that come to the state, when they come to the state, that we take out the actual cost of buying the plates, put those in a special fund, and use the part that's taken out and put into the special fund that's only related to the cost of the plates, the decals, and the freight costs, allow that to be used to purchase plates as we go forward, and then all the profit that's made goes directly to the general fund, and so this bill would allow that to happen.
Senator Hill, for what purpose you seek recognition?
Just a quick question.
Go ahead.
A few years ago, I think we had a discussion about where we were printing our tags and were we losing money on tags. Are we doing better on that? Because I haven't kept up with it.
We, this past year, the state, we deposited $13.5 million into the general fund as a result of the registration fees, and we spent, I think it was $3.5 million, and so we're depositing more than we're paying out.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have a motion? How sufficient to pass? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, next is Senate Bill 2835, manufactured and mobile homes bring forward provisions relating to the registration thereof. That is Senator Chris Johnson's bill. Senator, if you would explain the bill to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill, in its current form, has no changes in it. It just brings forward the code sections. We're still waiting to get some information back from tax collectors on how we can, what changes we can make to help them in streamlining the process of registering a mobile home. And that's all it does. I'm waiting on them to get back and just want to move the bill forward to give them more time to get those changes to us.
Questions? How sufficient to pass? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Next, Senate Bill 2757, Hospital Corporation Act of 2021. Senator Fillingane, this is your bill, and we'd love for you to explain it to us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee members. I know the hour is getting late, but I appreciate you waiting and letting us bring this bill up. And many of y'all were in the Public Health Committee and heard this explanation earlier, so I further apologize to y'all for hearing it twice, but it is doubly referred, so that's why I'm here. So the quick issue that we're trying to address specifically for Forest General Hospital in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, is that they're a large community hospital. They would like the ability to do partnerships with a couple of the hospitals that are very close in proximity to them, like right across the county line in Lamar County, where Senator Polk and I live, and namely the Wesley Hospital. And also just north of us in Jones County, there's a South Central Regional Medical Center that potentially would be a partner for Forest General. But due to antitrust laws, when you have overlapping service areas or close proximity together, there are certain considerations you have to make in order for these things to be accomplished. Now, Forest General, I know down in Senator Hill's territory, they have partnerships with the hospital there. So you don't need this type of legislation for every deal, but just the ones that are very close in nature and in proximity to your hospital. If it's a public hospital, which Forest General Hospital is, it's owned by Forest County, and the Forest County Board of Supervisors is sort of the entity that owns it. So with that explanation as to why we need this, I'll quickly go through the bill and try to explain what it does and how it accomplishes this. So Section 1 on line 9 is the short title, which it's creating the South Mississippi Regional Health Care Authority of 2021. Section 2, starting on line 12, is just the legislative intent, explaining further why we need this legislation. Section 3 is the definition section, so it kind of defines what all the different terms are in here. And healthcare facility, which was asked earlier, what does that mean? Is it just a hospital or is it other things? Starting on line 117, it defines specifically what the facility could include: hospitals, psychiatric hospitals, chemical dependency hospitals, skilled nursing facilities, end-stage renal disease facilities, ambulatory surgical facilities, home health agencies, comprehensive medical rehabilitation facilities, and other facilities and programs established dealing with healthcare services and health-related services. So that is the definition of that particular term. And then on line 124, to just make this a pilot program, the term owner here in this language of the bill refers specifically to the Forest County Board of Supervisors. So we're only dealing with Forest General Hospital because that's the only entity that Forest County Board of Supervisors owns as far as a healthcare facility. So how to do this, the process for which you convert a community hospital into a healthcare authority begins in Section 4 on line 126, and it goes through how they must adopt the resolution. The current community hospital board would have to do that. Then the owner should review and consider whether such a conversion would be in the best interest of the community served by the community hospital. Then there's a public notice and public hearing on lines 145 and following. Then after the public hearing, where all interested parties have the opportunity to be heard and to voice their concerns or support, whatever. And then you move on to, in the event that the owner decides to convert the community hospital into the regional healthcare authority, it shall adopt a resolution setting forth why such a conversion is in the best interest of the public and the residents of the area served by the community hospital. Then they create a resolution, and starting on lines 157 and following, it details what all has to be in the resolution. So that is basically a quick explanation of the process. And then if this is in fact created, the current Board of Trustees, which is 5 members, would be expanded to add 4 additional members for a total of 9, with 5 being in the county where the hospital is located, and the other 4 being, in the broader area covered here. And then it defines what the board members of trustees can do, how they're removed, all those boilerplate things that you have to have for boards. And then starting on line 270, section 6, it deals with the certain powers and authorities of the owners of the boards of trustees of community hospitals granted to owners and board of the trustees. So it essentially just transfer all the power from the community hospital to the new created healthcare authority. And starting on line 280 and following, it details what all those powers are. It talks about additional powers there in section 7, talking about acquiring hospitals or doing healthcare arrangements, joint operating agreements, those types of things. And trying to speed this up for you, it does tie it down to just the local area. If you look on lines 357 through 360, it talks about the authorization to perform these abilities detailed herein in Forest, Lamar, and Jones counties. So I know there have been some questions earlier from MMC about getting, way up into the Jackson area or any of their service areas. And because of their questions, we specifically revised previous iterations of this bill and tried to tie it down as tightly as possible for them, just down to Forest, Lamar, and Jones counties. Of course, they already operate in Forest because that's where they're housed. So really talking about 2 counties out of the 82 in the state that this would apply to, which would be Lamar and Jones counties. And if we need to do further work, there's a reverse repealer in the bill, which we'll see, I think, at the last section of the bill. So we're continuing those discussions with our friends at University Medical Center. But so far, we're trying to make sure that everyone understands it's very tightly limited. And then Section 8, you're talking about the ability to purchase liability insurance by the new entity, the fact that it is a governmental entity still, so it is a public hospital, it's a public entity. Section 10, dealing with the ability to issue bonds, and the ability to do trust in Section 11. Now, Section 12, and I'm not sure which version of the bill you're looking at, in the Public Health Committee, Section 12 and Section 15 were deleted via amendment. So I'm not sure if yours has that still in it. If so, it has been deleted. But there were some restrictions on whether the new entity would be subject to the provisions of the public bid laws. And so it's clear now that they would be, so that section was deleted. The same for public records and open meetings. The section limiting that in the previous bill was stricken through an amendment in the Public Health Committee. So sections 12 and 15 are no longer a part of the bill. And then the very last section, obviously section 19, is the reverse repeal section. So I would say that other surrounding states have these. Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia already have these public health care authorities. We don't currently have any in Mississippi, so this would basically act as a pilot program, because I do think other areas of the state may be interested if this works. I know Meridian, for instance, has 3 hospitals in a very, concise type area. So there have been some discussions that they would like to do something similar to this. But anyway, after talking to the Lieutenant Governor's office and with you taking the lead and Senator Johnson, Senator Barnett, I think it was decided that the best approach moving forward was to do a very small, limited project like this to see if it works and if there are any problems that arise. And then if it does work well, it could be expanded to include the whole state or other parts of the state.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You've heard the explanation. Any questions? For what purpose you seek recognition, Senator?
Question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Phillingain. Probably should have asked this in public health, but this is an inclusive type of arrangement so that any qualified organization can participate, in this new health plan.
Yes, sir. And you raise a good point that I probably failed to bring up. We're not forcing, if this were to become law, you're not forcing any entity to agree to partner with Forest General. This is all very, voluntary. So Forest General would not have to choose to offer a partnership with Wesley Hospital in Lamar County, nor would Wesley Hospital, if the offer was made, have to accept and agree to partner, or South Central Regional up in Laurel. It just, right now, they can't even really have a legal discussion about it because of these antitrust provisions that might be implicated. And so they don't want to spend time and money and waste everyone's, valuable time, even having the discussion if they know in the end those would go nowhere. So they're just wanting to have the ability to discuss the opportunities to partner or do whatever in Lamar and Jones counties. And yes, sir, it's very inclusive.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Senator Hill, what do you seek recognition?
Question, please.
Yep.
I'm looking at the section about certificate of public advantage. Currently, we have certificates of need for medical establishments or equipment or whatever, and people have to go through the health department and get approval if they're going to buy one piece of equipment. So I understand that this is allowing people more freedom, but I still have a concern that if the health department's going to govern this, is there any kind of way that we could accomplish the same thing and allow these entities to enter into these contracts just through the legal system and not have the health department come in and say whether they give their approval or disapproval? My thoughts were just, because we already have that certificate of need thing, is there just a way that we could do this without bringing the health department in to manage this and just let people do this on their own and basically just make their own business decisions?
If I could respond. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Hill. I think you raised a good point, and ever since I've been in the legislature, I've had concerns and questions about, do we even need a certificate of need? Does it serve the public purpose? And we can have philosophical debates about that. As far as this bill goes, we're not seeking to circumvent any of that. If there's a certificate of need provision in place by a particular hospital that wants to be partnered with, they will still have to be in compliance with the certificate of need. And so we're not trying to circumvent, if that was your question.
No, that wasn't my question. My question was, could we just do this without involving the health department?
Well, again, a good question. I know that the Forest General has already been approaching, Wesley in Lamar County, and so they have tried to work collaboratively together, and then their attorneys said, we can't move forward with this because of the antitrust laws in place and the fact that they're in such close proximity to each other. So they did try to do what you're talking about, I think, try to go it just in the private way.
I understand the need for the legislation to be able to allow them to do that. My concern is just making it run through the health department. So I think you've answered my question.
Okay.
I'm just not a fan of creating another certificate and bringing more bureaucracy into somebody trying to work together if we're trying to get obstacles out of the way. But I do appreciate your explanation and your work on that.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else? Do I have a motion? Motion is title sufficient to pass committee sub. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Minnie.
Next is Senate Bill 854, Department of Public Safety, revise the salaries of officers. Commissioner Tindall is here. If you would, please quickly explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. This bill is quite simple. It's a pay raise for the sworn law enforcement officers of the Mississippi Department of Public Safety, which includes Mississippi Highway Patrol and the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics. It's a 6.8% increase over the current amount for a starting trooper or starting MBN agent. That is $39,140. The new salary would be $41,800, and the pay increase would be the same percentage amount all the way up to the colonel rank. I will say that one of the first things that came to my attention early in my tenure was the sad incident of Lieutenant Troy Morris, who was a Mississippi Highway Patrolman down in Brookhaven. And of course, he was working a second job when he was murdered, running a postal truck on the midnight shift. And so I've also noticed that even in counties such as DeSoto, I think the starting salaries up there for one of the cities is $50,000 for some of their new law enforcement. So trying to remain competitive with our neighboring states, trying to remain competitive with other law enforcement agencies within the state, and trying to give these troopers an opportunity at a career where they don't have to work the midnight shift, putting themselves at further risk. And so that's why we're asking for the pay increase.
Okay. Any questions? Motion? Motion is title sufficient to pass. Committee sub. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Senator Hill, I'll recognize you for a motion. I promise this will be a very short subject to call. Give me about 2 minutes. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. I just want to make sure we got everything. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries.